Give me a higher level.
You're so cool, Brewster!
Okay.
How's that?
Well, we've only got 2 bars on the sound recorder, so we're going to have to keep it under an hour.
Keep it under an hour?
I know.
No, we can't do that.
Welcome everyone to Cinema Double Shot. I'm Wallace McKelvey, a journalist and filmmaker, and today, back by popular demand, is my partner, Josh Dorsheimer, an actor, a filmmaker, a educator, and many other things.
And a queer villain.
And a queer villain. Speaking of which, we have, as our special guest today,
Sir Christopher Lee, one of my very favorite things that I own. I'm so happy that he is here with us. Wallace, would you like to say why Sir Christopher Lee is donning the altar today?
Because Sir Christopher Lee is among the most recognizable vampires in movie history. He played Dracula in a whole... how many movies was he in?
Oh, I can't
as
even...
Dracula.
I can't
all
even tell you.
All the Hammer movies from the UK.
And then he did the Jesus Franco Dracula. Christopher Lee donned the mustache from the novel because Christopher Lee was very upset that in the Hammer movies that he did not have a mustache like Dracula was supposed to have.
Yeah, and like he doesn't have a mustache here in this, which is actually a photo from his James Bond movie, Man with a Golden Gun.
Yep.
Yeah.
His 3 nipples. Anyway. Anyway.
Do you care to explain that for people who haven't seen that James Bond movie?
Well, so every James Bond villain has something kind of weird with them. Mm-hmm. There's either like a deformity of the body or of the mind or both. Christopher Lee's...
Porque no los dos.
Correct. Christopher Lee's attribute in The Man with a Golden Gun was that he had 3 nipples.
The man with a golden gun, but 3 nipples. 3. Pew, pew, pew.
Back to vampires.
I mean, listen, in improv comedy, you have to point out the weird thing.
It's true. Well, I feel like Sir Christopher would be so upset with us right now because we've started off talking about him as the great vampire, when in reality he wanted to be...
He was a serious actor.
Well, there was this thing where... to go off on a quick anecdote that I love, Christopher Lee was in a John Landis movie called Burke and Hare, like right before he died, and he got knighted at the same time, and John Landis went to go to congratulate him, and according to John Landis, he was like, Christopher was like, oh no, it's going to be terrible. All of the headlines are going to say, Dracula knighted by the Queen. And that's exactly what happened.
Well, as your mentor and friend Victor Capici likes to say, being typecast is a good thing because you get more roles.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
The best way to be working is to be typecast.
Right, and he got a whole fan base. And we will learn later in the podcast that that's really all that you need to be happy with your acting career.
Well, later is now.
All right.
Well, the reason we decided to talk about vampires and vampire movies today, 2 parts. Number 1, we just went to Creature Feature Weekend in Gettysburg, which had a bunch of vampire movies, and also we showed one of our movies, Hacktress, which you can actually see on this channel on YouTube. Look up Wally Films or just my name, Wallace McKelvey.
Or the description.
Or it'll be in a link
there you go.
Somewhere, many places. No matter what podcast platform you're listening to this, or if you're on my YouTube channel, just mosey on over and check out Hacktress.
Yeah.
But we had a movie at Creature Feature Weekend that we worked on together called Hacktress, which is not a vampire movie.
No.
But over the course of the weekend, we got to see a couple of vampire movies and meet people who made them and have fun conversations about it. And also, just last night we got to see Sinners.
Yes.
The new Ryan Coogler movie that honestly is in the running. It's easily in my top 3 movies of the year.
Oh yeah, it's definitely in mine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Sinners, because that's like the more immediate thing.
Yeah. Well, I will just say, for me, Sinners is how you do a vampire movie. It takes vampirism, the concept of it, but it transcends the mythos and takes it and also makes it about something else. And that's all of the great vampire movies to me.
All the great horror movies.
All the great horror movies, yeah.
But yeah, like vampire movies are always about something else.
Yeah.
And Sinners is actually about several things.
Yeah.
Like there's a bunch of like interesting ideas that Ryan Coogler has crammed into this film, while also making it a really entertaining vampire movie.
Yeah.
So the basic crux of the plot of Sinners, if you haven't seen the trailer yet, which the trailer is ubiquitous. I don't understand why you watching a movie podcast and you haven't seen this trailer already. But in case you haven't, Michael B. Jordan, the frequent collaborator with Ryan Coogler, who has been in tons and tons of movies at this point, including the Black Panther movies, where he was great as Killmonger. He plays 2 roles. So Christopher Lee had 3 nipples, and Michael B. Jordan had 2 roles in this movie.
He plays them so beautifully, both of them.
He plays the twin brothers who are named Smoke and Stack, who, there's a certain kind of like unreliable narrator element to these characters, but what we can glean is that they came from Chicago. They were born and raised in Mississippi. They went up to Chicago as part of the Great Migration, worked for probably a bunch of, gangsters, Al Capone and company, and made a lot of money. And instead of staying in Chicago, there's a great line in the film that one of the twins says, which I don't remember which one. But basically, the North is just as racist, but we're choosing to return to Mississippi to embrace the devil we know. Oof. And they come down to Clarksdale, Mississippi, which has another kind of resonance for those who know the deep lore. But they return to Mississippi to open up a juke joint. And the first 45 minutes, there's no horror. It's character development.
I wouldn't even call it slow burn. I tried to call it a slow burn horror movie the other, to a friend earlier today, and I was like, I don't even know if that's it, because it's development. It's not there's no burn. It's just
it's almost like a hangout movie for the first 45 or even an hour. Because you're introducing all these interesting characters. There's the I believe they're Chinese, but I could be wrong. I hope I'm not wrong. But there's this Asian grocer and his wife who know the twins from back when they lived in Mississippi, and they help to kind of facilitate this juke joint that they're opening. There's the ex-wife of one of the twins who they recruit to be a cook, but she's also a witch and has connections to the other world.
Spookies.
Yeah,
she's my favorite character, by the way.
And then there's a singer who is basically basically Robert Johnson, if you know that, the blues singer.
Oh yeah.
So Clarksdale, Mississippi.
Oh yes.
Is actually
history lesson.
Is actually the storied location where Robert Johnson, the blues singer, allegedly came to the crossroads, sold his soul to the devil in order to become a great blues musician. And the movie is set in 1932 when this deal with the devil allegedly took place.
Well, my mind has just been blown because I didn't know that, and that adds a whole other layer to it.
It adds another dimension to this film. knowing
does.
that backstory about Robert Johnson.
Holy crap.
And there's a character not named Robert Johnson, but it's played by a newcomer named Miles Caton.
Oh, he's brilliant.
Who's
I
great
love
in
him.
this. And he plays kind of the Robert Johnson character in this film.
Yeah.
And they recruit him to come play his guitar at the juke joint. He's called Preacher
Boy.
Preacher Boy.
Yeah.
Yeah. The character's name is Preacher Boy. And no, I'm not going to spoil that. but an actual blues singer, a Buddy Guy, who is known for the electric blues, has got his career start in like the 60s and has been working steadily ever since, plays Preacher Boy all grown up.
Which is also
just
really
wonderful.
Cool.
It's
really cool.
There are multiple levels to this movie. I swear, we could probably just do a whole podcast about Sinners.
Yeah, but we also don't want to spoil it because that was part of the fun of it, like kind of not knowing.
There's all these levels to it.
Yeah.
But so these twin brothers, they come down south, they open up a juke joint, and on the opening night of the juke joint, as the place is just throbbing with life, a group of white vampires led by this Irish folk singer who has apparently been around for centuries. We don't get all the backstory, but these white vampires come along and they have been drawn to the music that's being created in this juke joint, and specifically the music being created by Preacher Boy, the Robert Johnson-esque character. And there's this wonderful scene through the vampire's point of view where the actual building, the juke joint, kind of melts away, and all they see is this throbbing mass of humanity dancing and singing and celebrating together. And there's all these almost spectral visions of various musical geniuses from the past and the present also circulating among the crowd. And it is just it'll probably be among the most memorable scenes in a film this whole year.
Oh, yeah.
It is one of those bravura scenes when you're in it, you're just transported completely. And you had a great observation, like in the movie theater as we were watching this, about what this movie is like.
Oh yeah, well, because the first half of it is a vibe movie, but then you've got two brothers who are, kind of doing their thing and then getting sucked up into this world of vampire sin. And I said it reminded me of a film that you introduced to me called Lovers Rock, which is a wonderful, chill kind of movie.
Directed by Steve McQueen.
Thank you. Mixed with the Robert Rodriguez movie, From Dusk Till Dawn, with the small change that the two brother characters in Sinners are actually likable. I actually like those characters.
As opposed to the brothers in From Dusk Till Dawn.
Who do not have a single redeemable quality.
I mean, most of the characters in that movie are like scuzzballs.
Yeah, Harvey Keitel was the one I wanted to live, but we're not going to talk about that. Had some cool stuff in it. We'll get to that. But
Sinners it creates this like warm vibe where you're in this kind of atmosphere full of people, celebrating, having a good time, and then boop, these vampires come along. And what's interesting is the vampires have a point of view. And if you think about it, they their point of view is kind of valid in some respects. What the lead vampire, who we learn, was
colonized.
He's Irish,
yeah.
And he talks about the British coming in and colonizing Ireland, and he comes to the American South, and his message at one point to these twin brothers is, come with me, become a vampire. You'll enjoy freedoms that you can't possibly enjoy in the mortal world of 1932. You know, you will live forever. You will enjoy limitless power and freedom that black people in 1932 didn't get to enjoy.
Yeah.
And it's a really there's lots of like just interesting stuff going on if you care to like listen to it.
Yeah.
And feel it and get carried away by it.
And even in terms of their own vampire lore, which is the thing that I get excited about, I feel bad I don't remember the witch character's name. I love her, though, the cook.
Yeah.
There's a scene
I think it's Annie.
Well, there's a scene in the film where she's talking about the lore about these characters, where you were just saying that they were trying to lure them in by saying, you know, you'll be free as a vampire. When in reality, when you hear the backstory and the mythos of these vampiric creatures, what they are actually doing is they host themselves in people. So it's all the same entity in individual persons, and their individuality is erased.
I'm not so sure about that. I don't know that their individuality is erased.
I mean,
but it kind of the way my interpretation is the vampires, once they harvest you and take your soul,
yeah,
it's like you've all been uploaded to the cloud. You know, there's a line by the lead Irish vampire where he's like, you know, once, you know, now I have all of your experiences, all of your history, everything you've ever felt, every emotion you've ever felt, and every vampire shares that with every other vampire. It's like they're all connected.
Yeah.
So in some respects, it's hard to tell if, you know, do you completely give over your self-identity, or is it still there, but now your experience has expanded to include every other vampire on the planet? But
that sounds overwhelming. I don't like that.
That's some galaxy brain stuff.
I don't like it. I don't like it. No.
But they're, you know, even in that, like that weird dichotomy, which I don't think the film answers it completely. Like that. That's one of those things where you're meant as a viewer to make your own interpretation. But in some respects, it speaks to the colonization of thought and culture, of, you know, the way these cultures, you know, you can interact but also like take over.
Yeah. Which is also very interesting. Something interesting about the film is that the gateway into this for the vampires is the music, which is very culturally significant also. Yeah. And at one point there is a whole mess of different sounds, which sounds, as you said, it sounds really cool, but at the same time there's at one point in the movie where you see it in a very joyous way, and then another point in the movie where you see it in a very sinister and menacing way. And I love the vibrant colors versus the pitch darkness of the other dance. And anyway, it's cool.
And it's not purely cultural appropriation. Mm-mm. I think that's part of it. Like there is a comment being made about cultural appropriation, but there's also a comment about the way all of these cultures are just organically interacting. Mm-hmm. Like in that initial sequence on the dance floor, you know, there's like a Chinese musician, because there are Chinese people on the dance floor, so they're bringing their culture to the dance floor, and so you see this spectral vision of a Chinese musician on the dance floor with them.
It's really cool.
And there's also a commentary being made because the Irish vampire, the lead vampire, is also a musician. He's bringing European-centric music, which, if you know anything about, you know, music and kind of the cultural history of the blues, you know, black music, black spirituals were in conversation with a lot of European music, including folk traditions involving Scottish people, Irish people, Germans. All of us brought our culture to America, and that culture just kind of interacted. Everything's in conversation with each other. And I think that it's really impressive the way Ryan Coogler has managed to weave all of these ideas together in such a satisfying way.
And on top of that, it's like the perfect vampire movie.
Yeah. It's freaking scary at parts.
Yeah. I saw you jump a couple times.
Yeah.
But it has all the recipe of a perfect vampire film on top of all that other stuff. And it's great because he not only said what he was trying to say, but also really nailed the aesthetic of that genre.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And indeed, multiple genres.
Yeah.
Like there's the hangout kind of movie. There's the drama with social commentary. There's aspects of like a crime movie involved. Mm-hmm. And then of course there's the vampire movie, and it's all in a delicious gumbo.
I want gumbo now. It's great. I actually want to see it again.
I do too. I would love to see Sinners again in the movie theater.
Yeah, I might reach out to Matt about that. Anyway, sorry. Now, when I compared this to From Dusk Till Dawn, by the way, I compared it on a purely just a basic level because, to be honest, it's nothing like From Dusk Till Dawn.
Superficially, it's a group of people trapped in a bar, and they're being attacked by vampires. Like that's the main similarity between From Dusk Till Dawn, which was like a Robert Rodriguez movie, produced by Quentin Tarantino, and I think Tarantino wrote it. Maybe
he wrote the screenplay, and Robert Kurtzman did the story treatment.
Refer back to Gettysburg Creature Feature Weekend.
Yes, we met Robert Kurtzman at a Creature Feature Weekend, and he was really chill and had a bunch of his creatures out. He also did the creature design for From Dusk Till Dawn, and I like From Dusk Till Dawn, but to me, it's not a perfect vampire movie.
Why?
Because it isn't really about anything. It is, but it's a very baseline kind of, it's a heist movie that just so happens to have vampires in it, which is fun. It's action. It's interesting. The makeup design's really great. I like the movie. But for me, a vampire movie is at its best, like you said, we talked about earlier, when it is telling, taking the vampire lore to tell a very specific story.
Yeah.
My favorite vampire movies. Well, actually, let's go back to the original vampire, which is Count Dracula. And that vampire story is interesting and is about something because that they kind of touch on. It's like a love story in a way. It's a heartbreak story, and it's a horror story, but there is something else. They're playing with sexuality and all that jazz.
I mean, Dracula, in Bram Stoker's original novel, is kind of queer.
Yeah, There's something innately queer about vampires, period, because they don't care about who they're intimate with, because they get life from everybody, which is why it is so interesting, and I love them. And the good Dracula movies acknowledge that.
Yeah, I think Bram Stoker's Dracula by Francis Ford Coppola is my favorite adaptation of Dracula.
Why is that, Wallace?
There are many others that are good. I love, you much respect to F.W. Murnau's Nosferatu.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Which is the granddaddy adaptation of Dracula.
And arguably it set up the tone for future Dracula movies.
Yeah.
The art style,
visually.
the German expressionism. The shadows, which the shadows come back in Bram Stoker's Dracula. Anyway, it set it set up what Dracula needs to be.
Yeah. But then I think what Francis Ford Coppola got right, I mean, number one, that movie is full of sex.
Yeah.
And it is arguably the most overtly queer. Like, there's all sorts of queer characters in Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Yeah.
Like, doing all sorts of stuff. and it's also like it's in dialogue with, you know, the 1931 Todd Browning Dracula, and it's in dialogue with the old Hollywood style of movie making, where there's like rear projection and there's like matte painting sets, except it's the 90s, and it had a massive budget, so they were able to do all sorts of really fun, interesting things visually, while making kind of making it a more, in some ways, faithful adaptation of the original text.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
And in other ways, you know, being even more explicit with the sexuality and with, you know, some of the themes that, like, in 1931's Todd Browning version of the story, you know, could only be alluded to.
Yeah. The Todd Browning version is quite tame.
Yeah.
Lugosi carries a lot of that movie with his charismatic presence on screen. Mm-hmm. That is his role. If you ask anybody to talk like Dracula, they talk like Bela Lugosi. I think that's his role.
Yeah. I want to suck your
blood.
blood.
Yeah. But
it's a cliche now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But as far as the film goes, it's not my favorite adaptation of Dracula.
What is your favorite?
Bram Stoker's.
Okay. Yeah. We're in agreement.
Yep, sorry. And I love Christopher Lee also. Christopher Lee, had a very, commanding presence as Dracula. And he brought in some of the grotesqueries that you'll also see in Bram Stoker's Dracula, with, like, the red eyes, and he had fangs. But Bram Stoker's Dracula did it correctly. And I'm trying to remember the line, but just to sum up everything about it being queer, there's a scene where the brides come in and they're about to feast on Keanu, and Dracula comes in and he's like, "He's not for you," and I'm just like, oh,
played by Gary Oldman to perfection.
And yes. I also have to point out that Bram Stoker's Dracula has the best Renfield. I love Dwight Fry. I love whatever his name is, who was in the Nicolas Cage movie, but Tom Waits, whoever's idea it was to cast Tom Waits as Renfield, deserves a raise, because he's brilliant in that movie. He's so weird, and I just love everything about that film. But that's Dracula. Dracula at a very baseline, though, kind of started that trend of it's about something else. He's not, oh, I'm going to come and eat you. I've been alive for years and I'm lonely. And which is something that everybody can kind of relate to. Which is why, my favorite vampire movies are ones that talk about the folks who feel isolated. It's often used as a metaphor for isolation, outsiders. Just like in Sinners, the appeal was, hey, come join us because you will,
you'll have a community.
You'll have a community.
And not only that, but you'll be respected.
Yes.
You'll have power. And, it's revealed in Sinners later that, because, and this speaks to the way knowledge works, like uploading your existence into the cloud with these vampires. Well, the Irish vampire sucks the blood and converts a member of the KKK in Sinners. And then he gets the knowledge that, in fact, these twin brothers, the KKK was planning to raid and burn down their juke joint the morning after it opened. And it's just like, it again speaks to the allure of this specific vampire, where he's extending, oh, you can have power.
Yeah.
And, this isn't just a sickness. It's a way to seize your power and your individuality, your personhood in a culture that doesn't respect you.
Yep. Which is just the epitome of being a vampire.
Yeah.
And I love Sinners because it has so much in common with my other favorite vampire movies that deal with that very, very specific thing. My favorite vampire movie of all time. You know it.
Fright Night.
It is Fright Night.
It is Fright Night.
It is Fright Night. And I love Fright Night because, very specifically, you have all different kinds of outsider vampires in that movie. You have, for folks who have never seen Fright Night, I'll give a brief breakdown of what it is. A nerdy horror movie guy hooking up with his girlfriend, but while he's hooking up with her, notices across the street that his new neighbor might be murdering or eating somebody. Yes, Jerry, his neighbor, is in fact a vampire.
Shades of Rear Window. There.
Yes.
Yeah.
But nobody believes him because he's the horror movie nerd. So the only person that kind of believes him is my favorite character, and that is Evil Ed, which is his other horror movie nerd friend. But he's the one that nobody likes.
Who's an even bigger dweeb than the protagonist.
The protagonist,
and also very much queer coded.
No, not even.
Evil Ed is semi-closeted gay.
He is. Well, and you have Jerry. There are a lot of queer characters in Fright Night. So, Evil Ed, who is my favorite character, I think, in any horror movie. That's a big thing to say, but I really like him because he's queer coded. And watching that movie, because similar to Sinners, there's a scene in Fright Night, spoiler alert, where Jerry, the neighbor vampire, basically says to Evil Ed, "You're not going to get bullied anymore if you come and join me." Mm-hmm. And also, he's a very handsome, strong man. And it gets kind of intimate. He pulls him in and embraces him and puts his mouth on his neck. And it is like older queer man. And Jerry is canonically queer. He has a live-in partner while also sleeping around with women. So he's very aggressively bisexual. Yeah. So you have this older queer vampire embracing this young queer kid. And that scene in that movie is so powerful. And that's why I that's my kind of vampire movie.
I mean, it's a little squicky, but
it is, but it's real. You know what I mean? It's, and similarly, you have another character in that movie who is kind of mousy and is afraid to open up with her boyfriend sexually, and when she is enticed by the vampire, she finds a way to kind of embrace that aspect of her too. It's so
it's like vampirism is sexual liberation.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I really like it. I think this might be a good point to say at Creature Feature, we did see Fright Night. We saw it on the big screen, which is
with a bunch of the actors.
With a bunch of
doing commentary. And you got to meet Evil Ed.
I did get to meet Evil Ed. For folks who are not viewing this on a video, I'm sorry for the podcast people, but here I've got a photograph here of Wallace and I meeting Stephen Jeffries, the actor who played Evil Ed. Yeah. And I got to tell him how much that performance and that character meant to me. And I painted him a painting, which he hung up at his table. It was very, very, very sweet. He's also very, very socially awkward. Oh, I think it's also important to mention that Stephen Jeffries, the actor who plays Evil Ed, there's another reason why that character seems very queer-coded, and that is because Stephen Jeffries is an openly gay actor.
Yeah.
So he brought his own stuff to that role.
Well, and this is a deeply meaningful movie for you, if you don't mind my saying.
No, it is a deep
because you were a pretty repressed as a young person, a young gay kid. You were pretty heavily repressed and bullied yourself.
Repressed, bullied, and a big horror nerd. So that character it felt like that. You. And I'm not the only person, because I've met a lot of people at even at the convention, we ran into people. It felt like every time we were going down the hallway, we would bump into like a weirdo, and it was like we were all part of the same weirdo club, and we were practically hugging strangers. It was wonderful. But I think it's not just me that this film speaks to, because I know a lot of people who love this movie, but that aspect very much so spoke to people like me, and that's why I think it might not be the best vampire movie like to some in the canon, but it is my favorite vampire movie.
Well, and I'm always like, the movies that speak to you don't necessarily have to be canon. They are your personal canon. Mm-hmm. It's the movies that matter to you, that speak to you in a moment when you needed them.
Yeah.
And I think you needed that movie at that time.
Absolutely.
Because like you grew up in a Catholic family, and it was explicitly not acceptable to be gay.
No. Yeah, absolutely. And this goes into a whole other thing why I like queer villains, but it was like, when you see yourself coded as the outcast, you kind of embrace those characters. Why I love Vincent Price. It's why, I love Evil Ed. It's because those characters were outcast, but they weren't necessarily bad. They were just kind of tossed aside.
Yeah.
So, and that's... Vincent Price has this quote that I love where he says, "I don't play monsters. I play men besieged by fate and out for revenge." and,
I do like that.
And I want that tattooed like somewhere. I love that.
Well, I think the idea of vampirism as giving people who are marginalized a degree of power that they don't have, is a theme that runs through a lot of vampire movies. Period.
Yeah.
One of my favorites that I think of in this realm is Let the Right One In, which I don't think you've seen.
I have not seen it.
Which is surprising because you love vampire movies.
I do.
But it's a Tomas Alfredson movie. I believe it's Swedish, if I'm not mistaken. And the basic setup of Let the Right One In is the initial, protagonist, who is not a vampire, is this kind of scrawny, like adolescent boy, like 10, 11, 12, somewhere around there, who's been bullied and grows up in a kind of buttoned down family that, you can tell that there's no one he can turn to confide in, to feel accepted.
Seems to be a pattern with these films.
Right? And he, in the middle of the night, what appears to be a father and daughter moves into their apartment block in the Scandinavian winter wilderness, and he ends up befriending the little girl who only comes out at night. And the two of them develop this increasingly close bond. She is looking for liberation because she's been with this man. It turns out, this isn't a spoiler. It's a vampire movie.
Yeah.
But the daughter is actually several hundred years old, and she's been with her Renfield character for too long. She's getting sick and tired of it. And she's looking for someone new who can fill that role. And between the two of them, this like adolescent boy and this little girl develop this bond, and she starts protecting him. But she wants something in return. And it is a really compelling film, and it again speaks, there's that theme of like a marginalized person who feels put upon and ignored, unseen, at times actively abused, for whom the vampire becomes a symbol of liberation. And that's just fascinating.
I definitely need to put this one. It's on Shudder right now, and I think Joe Bob does an episode with it, so I'm gonna have to check it out.
I'm surprised you haven't seen it.
It's been in my queue for a very long time.
But it's one of those highfalutin horror movies,
and that's okay. I just need to be in a certain mood for that.
I'm going to toss out another highfalutin horror movie quickly, and that one is called The Addiction by Abel Ferrara, which I have a feeling you probably haven't seen.
No, but I want to. I do. I am curious.
It's got Christopher Walken.
Oh, wonderful.
And Lily Taylor, and it's set in like kind of the intelligentsia, like kind of bohemian New York City in the early 90s. And as you can tell from the title, the social commentary running through this one is addiction. Where the vampirism is like, it's an addiction that like hollows you out and takes and kind of sends you down this spiral where you are increasingly desperate and you do terrible things. Initially it's kind of sexy, and then the deeper you get, the more monstrous you become, which I think is another kind of thread running through a great many of these these vampire movies, is like the internal struggle of the vampire. You know, at a certain point, it stops being fun.
Yeah.
And another movie, just a quick lightning round.
That's all right.
Only Lovers Left Alive, which I think is one of your friend's favorite movies.
It is
right?
one of Matt's favorite movies, and actually, I'm going to we're going to have a movie night this week. I'm probably going to bother him to watch that one.
Yeah. And that one's got Tilda Swinton, who is in fact a vampire. I'm convinced. But Only Lovers Left Alive is, I think it's set in Detroit or some like downtrodden, hollowed out American city. And it's got Tom Hiddleston and Tilda Swinton as a pair of vampire lovers who are, you know, feasting upon people in this American city. And the big theme of that is like ennui. These vampires, they've been at it for so long that, you know, it doesn't hold its meaning for them anymore. They're feeling, you know, it's not fun. And I think that's an interesting concept.
Yeah.
You know, the idea that like the thing that you were once attracted to is now a albatross around your neck.
Yeah. They're both of those concepts, the idea of being alive, that you become bored with things, and addiction are two other really big facets in vampire movies. And I definitely need to check both of those that you have mentioned out. But one of my favorite vampire movies actually combines those two things, and I think is kind of similarly in the same camp, and that's The Hunger.
Yes, the
yes.
David Bowie vampire
and
movie.
Catherine
Deneuve.
Gesundheit. David Bowie and Catherine Deneuve play basically swingers, vampire swingers. But the thing is, Catherine Deneuve has been going at it for a lot longer, and she has kind of a sex addiction that is tied into this ennui of, I've been alive for so long, and eventually even the people that I create to be my lovers will eventually dry and, you know, become old, you know, and then she has to, you know, and the thing that I like about The Hunger also is then it really gets aggressively queer, because, you know, she's like, oh, well, I'm going to maybe try the female flavor now. Susan Sarandon looks tasty. Like, so, but it also, there's sort of a narcissistic element to her vampire, though, that she's sympathetic, but you're also like, oof, like she's a piece of work. Very much in a sad, dramatic story.
Yeah.
There is another movie, though, that features that kind of narcissistic, I have plaything boys, and she don't give a fuck, and I think it's one of your favorite vampire movies. It's also one of my favorite movies. But if we're talking about narcissistic vampires,
Vamp. If you've never heard of Vamp, check it out. And it's a little trashy.
I love it.
Some of the script, like, it's got some really groan-worthy dialogue. What's interesting, the star of the show, in my book, the vamp of the title of this movie, it's a movie from the 80s, is my lover, Grace Jones. Yeah. Grace Jones makes a literal and figurative meal of this movie in which she plays the performer / vampire in this rundown, grungy bar on a side street in New York City in the 1980s. Lots of drugs and alcohol and you name it. But her character doesn't say a word.
Nope.
There's no lines of dialogue. And there are differences if you look up the backstory of the movie. There are several stories that who knows which story is actually true.
Well, as you said,
from her perspective, like, Grace Jones has said that she was channeling Max Schreck,
yeah, as
from Nosferatu,
yeah,
and like, she didn't want to speak dialogue. She wanted to do everything through body language, through movement, through facial expressions. And there's very much, you can see the references in that performance in Vamp. It is a magnificent performance as this vampire.
Yeah, she even does some of the Max Schreck things. He does this thing
with the hands,
and then, like, his eyes would move, and then that face follows them, and she, like, does that.
Grace Jones nailed it.
she has the physicality.
Yeah,
it's so good.
Now the director made some comments that she had trouble learning her lines, and it was difficult to get her on set because, she was touring and yada yada yada. I think probably the truth is somewhere in between.
Yeah.
But I don't think I'd want to see a version of this movie where Grace Jones has lines.
No.
Because part of the mystique of this character is she's able to lure these boys in with just her body and her mannerism and her aura.
And her fright wig.
She doesn't have to say a word in this film in order to make you fall in love or lust with her.
Yeah. And
to fall under her spell.
I agree. I also very much love Vamp. And it still kind of taps into that idea of being alive for a long time and becoming lonely.
Yeah.
So it's still very silly, though.
Well, the rest of the movie around her is kind of silly.
Yes,
but Grace Jones is great.
Yes, and I think it's a fun movie.
If in fact that script had lines for her, I doubt that they were very good.
Yeah.
Because there's lots of dialogue in that movie that I just kind of roll my eyes at, but visually, actually, and this is a credit to the director, visually it's a compelling film. It's got some beautiful cinematography, beautiful set design, costumes, obviously.
Her body paint.
The body paint that Grace
really...
Jones wears is just beautiful. So it's a well-designed movie and with a fantastic performance in the center of it.
Yeah. And
she's not in the movie for that long. Grace Jones is probably in it for, 15 minutes of an 85-minute movie?
Yeah. They use her just the right amount, I think.
Similar to Anthony Hopkins in Silence of the Lambs, Grace Jones, despite having relatively scant screen time in Vamp, she owns that movie.
She's the star.
She is the star. She's the vamp. Yeah. Well, it's about time to wrap up. Did we forget any big movies that you want to talk about?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So, Vamp is another one of the great 80s vampire movies. I feel like a lot of the really good vampire movies that I like came out in the 80s because there was a lot going on. But kind of similar going into what you were saying about Sinners, about vampire movies ultimately providing community. There is a movie that is literally about developing a community of vampires, and they're all kind of just tossed aside people. One of my other favorite vampire movies, which is Lost Boys, directed by Joel Schumacher, which is basically about...
Joel Schumacher is a vamp himself.
Yes, he is.
Otherwise known as the director of Batman with Nipples.
Another vampire movie. No. Lost Boys just has a sexy, greased-up saxophone player.
Yeah, who we once again got to see at Creature Feature.
Who was brilliant, as always. As Wallace likes to say, he's the hardest working man in show business. Tim Capello is his name, and you should listen to his music because he's got some...
He is freaking great.
He performs a lot with a group that I like called Gunship. Also look them up because he does some killer sax. But... he's only in that movie for about 15 seconds. But the main story are these brothers that kind of get welcomed into this gang of like low-life kids.
Yeah.
And who are outcast and find their community as vampires. The thing about this film that is a common thing with your kill your queers trope, because this is a very queer-coded movie, is that the gang, spoiler alert, end up being antagonistic vampires. So you kind of
root for them to die.
You don't. I don't.
Well, you don't.
Yeah, but like they are kind of villains.
Yeah.
And it has kind of like the bury your gaze trope where they stake where the vampires.
That's one of the reasons I don't really love Lost Boys.
Yeah,
I respect it for what it is, but it's not among my favorites.
But that element still can speak to me. But I think, and I will wrap it up with this, I suppose, with my going back to Fright Night. Another aspect of that, something that it does differently than Lost Boys, is Evil Ed does, spoiler alert, movie was from 1985, but
yeah, it's kind of hard to spoil a 1985 movie.
Evil Ed does die, but the interesting thing is he is staked by Roddy McDowall, who, by the way, another gay actor in this movie, and who's brilliant in it, playing kind of a washed-up horror TV show host turned Van Helsing. But he stakes this kid, and the kid cries.
Yeah.
And Roddy McDowall cries. And it's so weird because it's like you have this like horror show movie and it's like, oh, the good guy's coming in to stake the vampire. But when he stakes him, they both weep together.
It's a little bit sympathy for the vampire.
It is.
Yeah.
And so there's a bury your gaze trope in Fright Night, but the way that it's handled, it's like...
And it's a movie that gives you a lot of the big themes of vampire movies.
Yeah.
You know, you have the, offering someone who is marginalized, empowering them. You have kind of the sexy allure of the vampire, but you also get to see the other side of it, where even the main vampire, Jerry,
he becomes grotesque.
He becomes grotesque.
He's got the long Nosferatu fingernails.
So beneath the sexiness is like a real monster, and the longer you do it, the more monstrous you become.
Yeah.
So it's got a lot of interesting threads weaving through that movie. I think it's an underrated movie.
Yeah.
I much prefer Fright Night to Lost Boys.
I still love Lost Boys, but I think as far as the message...
Tim Capello is fucking fantastic in Lost Boys. But the larger plot doesn't...
I love Diane Wiest in that movie. Okay, we got...
Diane Wiest is a national treasure.
And the Coreys and Kiefer Sutherland Wallace. How can you do that to Kiefer Sutherland?
He died for our sins. No, he's still alive.
I was going to say, don't. He's another one who I was like, woof. Anyway.
You had the vapors.
Yeah, another vampire that anyway.
Well, to wrap up, what do you? What's coming up for you?
Well, this was it. No.
No,
No.
This is not it.
I have a play that's going to be in Fringe, having nothing to do with vampires, but it does have some queer coding in it. It is a queer-coded Cinderella, and it will be premiering sometime at Fringe. I don't have dates yet, but we're having our table read this week coming up.
Yeah.
It's somewhere between July 17th and July 20th with HVG Fringe. Very similar to somebody else in this room who has something going on. What do you have going on,
Well,
Wallace?
I will also be at the Harrisburg Fringe Festival, July 17th to 19th, I think.
Oh.
And, I'll be in the Offbeats, my musical improv team that riffs on movies and movie genre tropes, which is a lot of fun. I love the Offbeats. We just had a great show this weekend.
Yes, you did.
Yeah, I got to play a shark because one of our prompts for the improv show was Jaws, that was a lot of fun. But also River City Stories.
Oh, where have I heard about that before?
my feature film, which is, we are kind of piecing together. The first half of it is done. We will be screening the first half with a preview of the second half on May 16th and 18th at Zootropolis Cinema Stillhouse, the art house theater in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, with a Q&A between me and Paul, who has been on the podcast many times now.
Woo!
And will be again soon.
My favorite writer.
I'll probably end up talking about Sinners with Paul as well.
Oh,
because I saw that he just saw it.
Yeah,
he saw it like today.
And it.
Yeah.
You also go.
And at least a large chunk of the second half of River City Stories will also be screening at Harrisburg Fringe in July.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. I love Zootropolis. I also love Midtown Cinema. Shout out to both of them.
Yeah. We love our art house theaters.
Yes.
Go support your art house theaters. Go support independent filmmaking.
Zootropolis.
Support your locals.
Cinema Stillhouse and
Midtown Cinema.
For our local
and
folks.
West Shore Theater in New Cumberland.
Huh.
And the list goes on. I love independent art house theaters.
And
we need them.
Yes, we do. Mahoning. Sorry. That's a drive-in, though.
Colonial in Phoenixville.
Yeah.
We could keep going. Well, with all that said, thank you for joining us tonight. Remember to be kind to each other.
Good night. Good night, Sir Christopher. Children of the night.
Good night, 3 Nipple Man.